A young couple has decided that they're going to speak the truth because they're very alarmed by what they're seeing and the deception that is being told from Daystar. Lies. It's not okay. All parties have stated that they were never, ever asked to come forward. Jonathan and Susie did not ask these close family members to speak on their behalf. They never asked anyone and have never asked a family member to put themselves in a position where they can get backlash, knowing that this can happen. They haven't done it. And one of the reasons that they had to do it was because they saw that Jonathan and Susie were being misrepresented, maligned, and slandered. And because of that, they couldn't take it, and they decided they had to do their part. The couple that are about to tell their story, there was a season where Jonathan and Susie lost relationship with them, especially Susie, because Joni was speaking so badly about this couple behind the scenes, using the term Jezebel for the woman and rebellious for the man.
Marcus Rogers did a horrible hit piece video calling me horrible things, Potiphar's wife, and saying I have a bad spirit. He is being the mouthpiece of Joni.
My mother has gone around to tell all these ministers that she's had on, telling them the narrative that Susie has a Jezebel spirit. And so a lot of them believe her. She's very convincing. She's great at telling stories. And she's painted that narrative. And so now a lot of these major ministers are viewing even us stepping out and sharing our story as like, oh, Susie was mad or disgruntled, and so she's a Jezebel spirit, and they're trying to destroy the ministry. So that's the narrative that's being crafted that my mother has shared with a lot of the big names in the evangelical world. And so Marcus Rogers, he has talked to a lot of these pastors, a lot that my mother has spoken to, and they're all saying that Susie has the spirit that's driving her.
So Jonathan and Susie, hearing these accusations, were a little bit confused for a season, until it came to be their plot in life that they would be called those same words, a Jezebel and rebellious. And this time they realized there was no truth to it. It wasn't real. The common denominator in all of these stories is Joni Lamb.
Our experience with Daystar Chiropractor. For years we walked in quiet, seldom sharing our experiences. This is not out of revenge. We could have done this a long time ago. We wanted peace for our family. For us to get back in, it feels like we are risking so much of the peace that we fought so hard for. Our desire has been to walk in love and forgiveness, while being obedient to the Lord. The decision to share our story has come after much prayer, and we believe is relevant, in light of everything that has been revealed by Jonathan and Susie. I am Joni's nephew and Jonathan's cousin. I came to work at Daystar in 2015 and worked there until spring of 2021. During my time there, the chiropractor would work on various family members and employees in the Daystar green room. I was warned by Joni that any time he worked on one of the young women, another person should be present, usually the husband. I wasn't too alarmed about this initially, because that seemed like a good idea for any adult male working on young women to have accountability present. So, I was present anytime he worked on my wife. At first, this wasn't a problem. Later, however, the chiropractor started to voice irritation at my presence during my wife's adjustments. During some adjustments, he would make multiple comments about my wife's body. Then he texted me that he wanted to buy me and my wife dinner, and said he wanted us to come swimming afterward at his house. He told and texted me to remind me that he wanted my wife to be sure to bring her swimsuit. We were alarmed and concerned and alerted Joni. These incidents were prior to Susie's alleged abuse.
Marketing to prayer experience from my wife's perspective, cousin's wife. I worked in marketing under Rachel for almost a year. The people who worked in marketing as a whole were very nice, but it was very tense and stressful when Rachel was around. It was not what I would consider a healthy work environment. It was similar to other people's testimonies. The environment became increasingly more toxic. I scheduled a meeting with Rachel to respectfully share my concerns. In addition to the toxic work environment, she made fun of a close family member of mine a couple of times in front of staff, and there was no accountability for her. My husband and I shared the work environment issues with Joni, which we were quickly shut down and accused of being judgmental. Things continued to deteriorate and I started to notice the effect the stress was having on my body, so I decided to step down from marketing. After leaving marketing, I took some time and went back to school to work on my master's degree. While working towards that, I worked at heart for the world, and I loved getting to pray for and encourage those that would call in with God's word. I decided to try and see if I could get a job in the prayer department. This was an entry-level position, however, when I applied for the job interview was with Joni and Jai, Susie's dad, and Jonathan. It seemed odd to me that Joni, the co-founder of Daystar, would sit in for a prayer partnership interview, as I didn't think that was normal protocol. The interview proceeded like any other interview at first, but then Joni asked Jonathan and Jai to leave and it was just me and Joni. Joni then told me the Lord loves a teachable heart. Susie has a teachable heart. I want you to have a teachable heart like Susie. She told me I was on a 3-month probation period, and her specific expectation was that I was to comment on Rachel's social media posts, and I was not supposed to tell Rachel or anyone. That night, I liked and commented on one of Rachel's social media posts. Joni texted me and said that Rachel had asked her if she had talked to me about liking her social media posts. Joni in a text said no to Rachel, but in reality, she had talked to me about it. I was conflicted, but I wanted to have a teachable heart, so I was trying to please Joni. I thought she, being a ministry leader, would know what the Lord loved, and she told me the Lord loved a teachable heart, so I wanted to please the Lord.
Meetings with Joni. Then we had a family member who my wife and I were concerned about, and tried to distance ourselves from them. This family member in reference is not Pete, it's someone different. We noticed some behavior from this family member that was concerning. The more time we spent, the more uncomfortable we became. We didn't feel comfortable spending time around this family member, and we felt like the Lord was warning us to separate ourselves from them. When we distance ourselves by not spending as much time around them, it caused quite a stir in the family. Joni took this as an opportunity to get involved. Me and my wife tried to back away very quietly and didn't want to cause any problems. Joni would call me into private meetings to discuss the issue, sometimes alone, sometimes with other people. Most of the time I had limited warning, having to leave my desk at work to attend them. I worked in the accounting department at Daystar at first. I thought she wanted to help, but the longer these meetings went on, I realized that wasn't the case. When we raised issues of some of the comments that this family member had made, such as an off-the-cuff comment to my expecting wife with our first child that we were excited about, "If you want an abortion, I know a guy." A joke about torture inflicted by piranhas being funny. And an instance where they responded to a telemarketer by joking, they would be right back, but only after they finished having sex with a goat. My wife and I started feeling uncomfortable with this person being around our baby. In these meetings I shared with Joni, and she responded that some Christians have different senses of humor. We felt that this was not a sense of humor issue, but something was very wrong. These comments, plus the family member's interest in being around diaper changes even when we would go into a separate room, began to concern me more and more. This happened multiple times and in growing frequency. One instance at Joni's lake house, our child needed a diaper change, so my wife told me, "I need to change our child's diaper, I'll be back." She left the living room, and the family member followed behind my wife and went into our bedroom across the house near the entrance. Susie noticed the family member follow my wife, so she followed and asked what the family member was doing when he went into our bedroom while my wife was preparing to change our child's diaper. Susie said, "What are you doing?" The family member lingered and Susie asked the family member to leave. The final straw was during a family movie night. We had our child sleeping in a pack and play in a separate room. While we were watching this movie, then this particular family member got up and went into the direction of that room, which I thought was odd. I got up and followed them into the room, and the family member was sitting in the dark, with the lights off on the couch beside the pack and play, where my child was sleeping, just 5 feet away. I questioned them, asking why are they in there. The family member didn't know what to say. I told him to get out of the room and not to go in there if my child is sleeping. When we brought up this last event, we were told by his family that that room was their safe place, and that is why they wanted to go in there. However, this family member had his own room upstairs. Due to this incident and the odd and strange explanation from the family, we started to distance ourselves from them. We felt our concerns were not being taken seriously. So, with great amount of caution, we decided to protect our child and limit interaction and access with this family member. Due to this, we started receiving pressure from Joni stating that we were dividing the family. It was after this Joni started to hold meetings, where she would call me in and I shared my concerns. She would take the opportunity to target my wife. She felt my wife was the root cause of dissension in the family when we chose to distance ourselves, and she would try to convince me that my wife was controlling and manipulating me, that I had no reason to be concerned regarding this family
I, as a
member,
man,
and
need
instead
to
that I should
man
stand up to
and
my
take
wife.
control of the situation and my wife, and it's just crazy. Like,
So now you're in trouble with her.
So now you're
Why are you in trouble? What,
I'm not-
you'll make me some bad guy.
I'm not in
Said
trouble
you
with her.
can
I'm
be.
just
She says
just
no,
speak
you
your
are
mind. I'm
you are
telling.
bad, Susie. You've got him by the balls, and you know it. And
Wow,
that's
babe.
exactly what
Babe,
you
they're
do.
really scary. They think horrible
no,
things.
no. That's not
I
the
love
case.
you
at
by
all.
the balls.
And other people
Who
see it. You
talks
see it in
like
your eyes
this?
right now, and you look at him like
Who
you gave him a
talks?
look.
I gave him a look of pity. Like I'm trying to. You're cornering him. This is so evil. What is happening?
No, what's evil
And
is
you're
you.
telling me that I've
What's
got him
evil
by the
is you and the
balls.
spirit
So-
that's driving you.
I expressed that I am in complete agreement with my wife concerning the red flags regarding the family member. While trying to convince me that my wife is being manipulative, Joni would tell me, "You need to use wisdom with what you share with your wife." I didn't think this was right, as my wife and I are one, and I believe we should never keep any information or secrets from the other. She would bring up other husbands in the family, citing them as good examples for getting their wives in line, and that I should do the same. Joni tried pressuring me into going to a counselor over the issue, but only the counselor she wanted. At first, I agreed. Right after agreeing to counseling, I began to receive phone calls from various family members who were very upset at us, especially at my wife. They expressed nearly identical wording as Joni had, and I began to suspect that Joni was privately having conversations with them. I believed their issues with us were not organic but sparked and stoked like a flame by Joni. I now had to put out fires with other relatives. It felt like a coordinated pressure campaign, so I decided to let Joni know I would not attend counseling. Going to counseling felt like a trap, and I did not have a peace about going, after she isolated us from the family by these coordinated attacks. She was absolutely livid, telling me I was double-minded and not a man of my word. Later that week I was called into another meeting. In that meeting, Joni told me that I had no choice but to go to her counselor. I told her that it isn't right, that you can't just force someone to go to counseling against their will. Joni said you will go because it is affecting your work performance.
My son Jonathan Lamb's employment. That decision was not taken lightly. It followed a 15-month review of Jonathan's performance and his refusal to take any steps to satisfy a detailed performance improvement plan put in place.
I respectfully responded it has not, and that a personal matter of not wanting to spend time around another family member is not grounds for being forced into counseling by an employer. She abruptly ended the meeting. 2 hours later, while on my lunch break, I was called into another meeting. This time when I walked in, she had my boss in there. I always have had a great relationship with my boss, and she tried to use him to persuade me to submit to her. He was in a rock in a hard place, being asked to share with me the importance of family and listening to your elders.
But that is what the Lord showed me. That is what the Lord showed me. You need to step back and let Jonathan be the man. Jonathan needs to go seek wise counsel privately with the elders of the church. And
she never asked him about my work performance in front of me, leading me to believe she had asked him before I came in, and he answered not to her liking. I had one final meeting with Joni. During this meeting she switched her tune, being very friendly. She would tell me about the future plans she had for me, that one day I would help Jonathan run Daystar as his right-hand man. This is something that she had expressed to me multiple times in my years in Texas, but money and positional authority isn't what motivates me. I believe if God wanted it to happen it would, but regardless, I should be content with whatever my lot in life is. Joni tried to convince me to spend time with that family member at least once a month. I told her I didn't feel like that's what the Lord wanted me to do. When she saw that I was not complying, she became angry and her eyes were like daggers. She threatened my job and dismissed me from the meeting. We are so thankful we didn't back down despite the intimidation and threats. That we held to our convictions from the Lord, because we believe our child would have been in great danger. If we had listened to Joni and compromised our convictions, we believe we would have jeopardized the safety of our child. As a result of holding our ground, we were berated for not participating in family events. Over the course of our final few months in Texas, my wife and I sought God very much, giving much time to prayer, checking our hearts often because we wanted to be pleasing to the Lord. We didn't want to make any missteps and sin before God. We hated the drama, we just wanted to raise our newborn child in peace, praying to God that He would please give us a release to move away from Dallas and from Daystar. After my job was threatened, we felt a release, that we could finally leave. We left Daystar and moved away even without a job and had to trust God to be our provider. I felt it was more important to protect my child and family than to risk staying at Daystar. For years we kept much of our experiences to ourselves. We felt God impressed upon us not to share but rather walk away living in forgiveness and focusing on raising our family. We were essentially cut off from the Texas family, and it wasn't until after we saw what happened with Jonathan and Susie that we realized we weren't alone. It is only now that we feel that we had no other choice than to come forward. We felt a conviction from the Lord, after hearing about the alleged sexual abuse of Jonathan and Susie's child, that we couldn't stand on the sidelines after experiencing for ourselves intense persecution, while trying to protect a child.
Heir apparent is out, because he finally found what he wouldn't bow to. He wouldn't bow to sin, and he wouldn't compromise his values. And that's always a problem for Joni. If you're not going to compromise, and if you're not going to put your perceptions of holiness and righteousness aside in order to do what she wants you to do, you will not survive there.